We can't buy into this lie that law enforcement at the American southern border is somehow not compassionate to families who want to cross illegally. Our number one responsibility is compassion to our fellow Americans, and that starts with enforcing the southern border. You cannot have a country of law and order, of stability, of basic good governance unless you get control of what Biden has left us.
J.D. Vance, 1 week from now, will be sworn in as the Vice President of the United States, and he's not an Ohio Senator anymore. He had to resign his office. So I think right now he's sort of a man without a country. He's got some free time on his hand. He's moving from Alexandria across the Potomac to the Naval Observatory as soon as Kamala gets out of there, and they fumigate the place because Lord knows, right? So with some of his extra time, he appeared on Fox News Sunday with Shannon Bream yesterday. And boy, oh boy, isn't it nice to have a man who's going to be vice president actually capable of putting a couple of sentences together. But more than that, he confronted some of the issues and some of the lies and some of the various political threads that are being pulled right now in Washington, D.C. to try to begin the resistance to Trump 2.0. We will start here with immigration and the deportation question.
Egregious things that you cite that I would think all Americans are against.
Sure.
That's a small fraction of the millions of people who are here, who have built lives. Many of them have been here for decades.
So you do have hundreds of thousands, maybe even a million people who, in addition to crossing into the border illegally, have also committed some measure of violent crime. So it's actually a very large number of people, Shannon. And the point is that if you want to fix the overall border crisis, you have to engage in law enforcement. We can't buy into this lie, really, from the extreme left, because I agree with you. Most Americans want common sense border enforcement. We can't buy into this lie that law enforcement at the American southern border is somehow not compassionate to families who want to cross illegally. Our number one responsibility is compassion to our fellow Americans, and that starts with enforcing the southern border. You cannot have a country of law and order, of stability, of basic good governance unless you get control of what Biden has left us at the American southern.
Very well said, number one, by J.D. Vance, number one. Number two, love Shannon Bream, I do, but I what I hate is conventional wisdom in Washington, D.C., and this has just become this thing that's been adopted by the smart set in Washington that they keep repeating. It's like, well, it's a very small minority of people who have come to this country illegally who have actually committed further heinous crimes. Most of them have built their families, and they want to be contributing members of society. All right, number one, 10% of the people. If it's 10% of the people who have come into this country illegally, that's over 1 million people. And by the way, we don't know. We don't know how many. You know how many people commit felonious crimes in California, shoplifting, et cetera, that just don't go enforced because of the prosecutors that Democrats have championed with all their George Soros dollars? There is a climate and culture of criminality that has infested some of the major urban centers in this country. And they also happen to be major areas where huge numbers of illegal immigrants have all been brought to stay as so-called refugees seeking asylum. I believe it was the mayor of New York, a Democrat, who said right now they could deport 60,000 people from that city. Back where I come from, 60,000 people, that's a lot. That's a lot of people that could, fill the biggest baseball stadium in America. And if they're all here criminally and they continue to break the law, how about we deport them? And how about we don't start repeating this old tired yarn that they came here? Oh, sure, they broke our immigration laws, but they're really just here to build a home and family. It's interesting. Why is this the only law that people in Washington, D.C. try to equivocate in such a way? Can you imagine? Oh, sure, he hasn't paid his taxes in 30 years. But, he's a successful businessman, and he's got a lot of children, and he's established a home here. And by the way, all that money that he didn't pay in taxes, he's been buying a lot of stuff, and that's money that contributes to a thriving economy. It's not like he broke any other law. It's funny how tax laws are the things that there's no tolerance for in Washington, D.C., but pretty much every other law they did. Listen, there's going to be people deported, and they should be deported. And do you know why they should be deported? Because that's the law. And if Democrats and establishment Republicans and all of their media partners in Washington, D.C. don't want those people deported, then maybe they should change the law. Why don't they change that law? Why do they just rely on whoever happens to be the president? And they've been doing it for 20 years since Bill Clinton. Why do they continue to just expect whoever becomes the president to ignore that law instead of putting their money where their mouth is and actually writing a new law? You don't want people who came into this country illegally to be deported, then you should change the law that currently says the people who come into this country illegally should be deported. That sounds simple, doesn't it?
Who are humanitarian activists and others who are worried about these deportations, saying families are going to be separated, people are going to be put in tents and in terrible conditions. They have real concerns about the way you plan to actually mete out those things you're planning to do.
Yeah, so this term is something you're going to hear a lot in the next couple of months, the next couple of years, Shannon. Family separation. I think it's important. That's a euphemism. That is a dishonest term to hide behind the fact that Joe Biden has not done border enforcement. If you say, for example, in the United States, we have a guy who's convicted of a violent crime and has to go to prison, we want that guy to go to prison. But yes, it does mean that that guy is going to be separated from his family. That is the consequence of committing violence upon your fellow citizens. If you come into this country illegally, you need to go back home. You need to have basic law enforcement. And what the Democrats are going to do is they're going to hide behind this. They're going to say that this is all about compassion for families.
Yeah, good for you, JD Vance. Well done. And by the way, nice lilac tie. Can we bring lilac back? I've been personally trying to bring lilac back as much as possible here in Washington, and it's good to know that I have a partner in this endeavor. Family separation, get ready for it. It's all you're going to hear. What it means is people come to this country illegally, they have a kid, now it turns out they've broken the law further, they should be deported, but oh, they have a child here, and the child is a natural born citizen, so you should allow this person to stay. No. Number one, if you don't want to be separated from your children, then don't break our laws and come into a country where you are violating the law and could potentially be deported. And number two, don't further break our laws that put you at the top of the list to be deported because you're an illegal alien criminal. All right. That's number one. That's number two. And if I may, number three, he makes the perfect point here. The fact that anybody in this country who breaks the law and goes to jail immediately, by definition, is separated from their families. And we're okay with that. Why are we only opposed to it if it happens to be someone who's also in the country illegally from a foreign nation, not even American citizen? And if I may, Vice President-elect Vance, because he's very good at this and he certainly doesn't need my help, but we should probably also add one more rejoinder. Why is it for the last 4 years, nobody was concerned about the family separation that ended up with hundreds of thousands of children being lost in the system, and for all we know, handed over to drug traffickers and human smugglers and pimps and God knows what? We have children in this country that have been separated from their families that the Biden administration gave the A-OK to and handed them over to the worst elements of society. And we have no idea where they are. At least with this family separation that they're so concerned about, we at least know where the children are. They're back with their parents and going back to their parents' home country if they don't stay here with others' guardianship. All right, moving on. The question of Greenland came up. Everybody's favorite question, Greenland. What are we going to do about Greenland?
What's the deal with Greenland and the Panama Canal? Are we using or considering use of military force in any of those situations?
No, look, we don't have to use military force, Shane.
Hold on, and I got to stop this because this is a textbook example of what the mainstream corporate legacy propagandists who call themselves journalists do. Last week, Donald Trump is having a press conference, a freewheeling press conference where he takes questions from everybody, something that Joe Biden basically has done, what, twice, I think? Even then, I don't think he's done it at all as president of the United States. Frankly, every single press conference he's done, he hasn't taken questions from everybody. It's all scripted and everyone's pre-screened. Trump is taking questions, and he started with a reporter from the New York Times. And the reporter from the New York Times, it's not like Trump wrote a speech and delivered these remarks to the world saying, just so you know, we're going to take Greenland and Panama, and if we have to use military force, we will. He didn't say that. He got asked by a New York Times reporter, will you today rule out using military force for the Panama Canal and Greenland? Now, first of all, Trump should have said, let's separate those two issues, okay? Because they're very different situations, the Panama Canal and Greenland. Secondly, a president should never rule out using military force for any international strategic military endeavor, because when you rule something out, you're stuck. And a president, and certainly a president-elect, should not box himself in any way whatsoever if military force is going to be necessary, number two. Number three, specific to the Panama Canal, let me tell you something. We built that thing. We lost tens of thousands of American lives building that thing. We built that because we needed it for our economic and national security interests. We use the Panama Canal on a regular basis to transport our Navy vessels from the East Coast to the West Coast and to escort our allies' vessels from the East Coast to the West Coast. And now China is down there. And the only reason that we're talking about Panama Canal right now is because Jimmy Carter gave it away for $1. And now the Chinese have their claws into that Panama Canal. If they take over the Panama Canal or in some way infringe on our ability to move our military vessels from the East Coast to the West Coast at any given time, you better believe it is incumbent on whoever the president is to threaten and even use military force if necessary to make sure that our military can move unencumbered from our West Coast to our East Coast. Period. End of discussion. And there is absolutely nothing wrong with that. But the only reason that Donald Trump didn't rule it out is because this stupid New York Times reporter decided to inject this into the narrative. So the question, will you rule it out? Well, that's a stupid question, and I won't even address it. Next question. But instead, Donald Trump did what Donald Trump does, which is, no, I'm not going to rule that out. And now everyone, oh my gosh, he's threatening to use military force. No, he didn't threaten to use military force. He refused to rule out using military force, which is a very different thing. So now we go back to how this narrative is growing and ballooning.
Using or considering use of military force in any of those situations?
No, look, we don't have to use military force, Shannon. The thing that people always ignore is we already have troops in Greenland. Mm-hmm. Greenland is really important for America strategically. It has a lot of great natural resources. My friend Donald Trump Jr. was there a couple of days ago, and you know what they told him? They want to be empowered to develop. The people of Greenland want to be empowered to develop the resources there. We also need to make sure that Greenland is properly cared for from an American security perspective. And frankly, the current leadership, the Danish government, has not done a good enough job of securing Greenland. I think there actually is a real opportunity here for us to take leadership to protect America's security, to ensure that those incredible natural resources are developed. And that's what Donald Trump is good at. He's good at making deals, and I think there's a deal to be made in Greenland.
Okay.
Yep, there you go. And he's not wrong about that. In fact, all indication from the people of Greenland and the Prime Minister of Greenland, as we've mentioned on this program, is that they want independence. They've been asking for independence from Denmark, and they are more than willing to discuss the possibility of some sort of strategic alliance with the United States of America, which, by the way, makes more sense. Greenland is part of North America, not part of Europe. But for all of you who want to, be in the colonial past and think that the monarch and kingdom of Denmark is in some way legitimately the owners of some landmass over here in North America, well, go right ahead. Next, you're telling me the King of England has some sort of alliance with Canada. Come on, give me a break. Oh, wait a second. Yeah, that's another story for another time. Thank you. That's very well said by Mr. Vance. You notice he did not bring up the issue of the Panama Canal at all in that question of military force, and that's because that's very serious, and that continues to bubble. I mean, Greenland is serious too, but that Panama Canal issue, as I just laid out, must be addressed, and it's going to be addressed very quickly. All right, now, this question and answer having to do with pardons for the January 6th prisoners came up, and it's gotten a lot of buzz, and we're going to talk about it here. But before we even get to it, let me just point out that the current president of the United States, whatever his name is, or whoever is making decisions for him, just commuted death penalty sentences for 40 of the 43 hardened, convicted rapists and mass murderers sitting on the federal death watch right now. They've all been on death row waiting for the capital punishment to be administered to them. And he gave them all basically a blanket commutation. He also gave his own son a blanket pardon for 10 years worth of criminal behavior. Why this hasn't gotten a little bit more widespread scrutiny and angst, I'll never know, except for the fact that the media in this town act as propagandists for Joe Biden. But now suddenly a potential pardon for people who were arrested and convicted for entering a door that a police officer was holding open on January 6th, suddenly that is the most controversial idea on the planet when it comes to pardons and commutations. So here's the question and answer that now everyone's buzzing about.
President Trump says there's a process. Where is the line drawn on who will and wouldn't be considered for a pardon?
I think it's very simple. Look, if you protested peacefully on January the 6th and you've had Merrick Garland's Department of Justice treat you like a gang member, you should be pardoned. If you committed violence on that day, obviously you shouldn't be pardoned. And there's a little bit of a gray area there, but we're very much committed to seeing the equal administration of law. And there are a lot of people, we think, in the wake of January the 6th who were prosecuted unfairly. We need to rectify that.
All right. Now, a couple of things here that need to be pointed out because everyone's freaking out. It's like, wait a minute, you're not going to give a blanket pardon to everybody? Listen, this is a very reasoned response. If you did commit violence, if there is video of you committing violence against a police officer or defacing and vandalizing and breaking windows of the Capitol building, maybe you shouldn't get an immediate blanket pardon. Maybe you get a commutation. Maybe there are mitigating circumstances. Now, a lot of people are looking at this and saying, oh, hell no. We know that there were FBI resources involved here. There were informants. That should be investigated to see if they actually set this thing up and egged it on. If they're responsible for that violence or if they're responsible for encouraging people to commit that violence. We don't know that. They should get a retrial. That's fine. Listen. He just said specifically that all of this needs to be looked at, especially if you did create violence. Watch his answer one more time, specific to people who were guilty and convicted of committing violent acts that day.
That day, obviously you shouldn't be pardoned. And there's a little bit of a gray area there, but we're very much committed to seeing the equal administration of law. And there are a lot of people, we think, in the wake of January the 6th who were prosecuted unfairly. We need to rectify that.
There's gray area there, and we need to look at each individual case. And there were some that were prosecuted unfairly. And by the way, that does include people who committed violent acts. That doesn't mean if you were prosecuted unfairly, you probably will get a pardon. If you weren't prosecuted unfairly, but maybe you got a draconian sentence because you were talked into it and intimidated by it, maybe you'll get a commutation. Everybody chill out. But there were a lot of negative reactions to J.D. Vance. So J.D. Vance, being the fine communicator and user of social media that he is, he addressed it specifically. But you'll see, I want you to look at what he's responding to. The Hodge twins here with a video. Video gets released of cops shooting innocent J6 protesters, and J.D. Vance goes on Fox News and tells the world that only nonviolent protesters should get pardoned. Better rethink what you said, J.D. Okay, this is footage from that day where the police were using rubber bullets shooting people, and they say, well, listen, you got shot by a rubber bullet with a cop, and you reacted to defend yourself violently. You should get a pardon too. Well, maybe. But maybe not. And here's what J.D. Vance said to that. First of all, I donated to the J6 political prisoner fund and got roasted for it during my Senate race. I've been defending these guys for years. Second, there were federal informants in the crowd. Do they get a pardon? I don't think so. The president saying he'll look at each case and me saying the same is not some walk back. I assure you, we care about people unjustly locked up. Yes, that includes people provoked, and it includes people who got a garbage trial. So there you go. Everybody chill. Everybody chill big time. I think that's important as this continues to play out. And unlike Joe Biden, each individual case will be looked at properly and appropriately and dealt with properly and appropriately. And I think that that's the perfect answer that J.D. Vance just delivered. It is. And also one other thing for everybody screaming about it. Trump can't do that. Trump can't do that. Trump can't do that. Trump literally said this is what he was going to do during every rally during the build up to the election day. There's no surprise here. There's no secret that Trump planned on giving pardons, as many pardons as possible, to people who got caught up in January 6th. The American people knew that, and the American people voted for it. So maybe, just maybe, we should take that into consideration too. Increased tariffs on our trade partners. They're coming, man. Tax cuts and regulation changes. Well, I hope they're coming. Learn why gold is a viable diversification tactic now more than ever. That's right. All of the things that the Trump administration is about to implement economically is going to affect your pocketbook, your long-term plans, and gold has got to be a part of that. Birch Gold, the only company I endorse, they're releasing their ultimate guide for gold in the Trump era. And there's a foreword of that book written by Donald Trump Jr. Get your free copy right now, along with Birch Gold's free information kit on gold. All you got to do is text my name, Larry, Larry, easiest name in the world, to 989898. Larry, text that to 989898. The facts don't change regardless of who the president is. Our national debt going through the roof. The interest payments on the national debt going through the roof. Gold is still your hedge against a weakened dollar, and Birch Gold, still the company I recommend to help you convert an existing IRA or 401k into a tax-sheltered IRA in gold, and not one penny out of pocket for you. So text my name, Larry, to 989898. Get your free copy of The Ultimate Guide for Gold in the Trump Era. There's no obligation, only information. Once again, that's my name. Text Larry, Larry, to 989898. Do it now.